But there are biohacker transhumanists out there, young kids mostly, that really want to take it to the next level. And they're also trying to implant chips onto their brains so that they could be the very first people to commune with basic artificial intelligence. So they have the first telepathic communication with machines, because we now have so much different types of brainwave headsets and brainwave technology that you can actually put a chip in your head and talk to your computer in a very basic. It's the beginning of the Matrix.
In this Matrix-like existence, we would live in the silicon, or in other words, servers, and our new brains could be copied numerous times. So there could be many versions of ourselves theoretically placed in any type of body.
It's not far-fetched to actually have that happen with our minds and have a way to download our mind into something that is like this.
What I did was to have 100 electrodes fired into my nervous system to link my nervous system with the computer. And in that way, we tried different experiments, giving me extrasensory input, ultrasonic senses, if you like, and linking my nervous system to the internet so that I could control a robot hand across the Atlantic Ocean via the internet, but also experience what the hand was feeling.
The level of change that we are going to see in the next 20, 30 years will be literally unlike anything we've ever seen before. So what is happening with knowledge and technology, and therefore also the impact of technology on our world, is that it is not just accelerating, but the acceleration itself is accelerating. It is literally like a rocket or a spaceship taking off.
Explain to us where we are in the understanding of the brain.
Well, Hollywood gets it first, right? But remember the movie The Matrix, when you push a button and become a karate master? Or Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger, where memories are simply put into the mind? We're on the border now, the brink, the threshold of initiating all these wondrous things. Think about it. Telepathy, reading minds, telekinesis, moving objects with the mind, uploading memories, even photographing a dream. These are things that are being done in the laboratory today, not tomorrow. What is happening now in the laboratory is that we're beginning to understand our own brain, not a robot brain, but our own brain. We're beginning to understand how memories are formed, why we have super geniuses who can do fantastic mathematical calculations in their head, and photographing your thoughts and using your thoughts to energize machines so that the mind is not going to be replaced. The mind will be interfacing with machines, controlling machines mentally.
I aim to build an artificial general intelligence, an AI system that can become massively smarter than human beings and understand more about the universe than any human possibly could. We really need to abolish aging in the same way that we need to abolish cancer and we need to abolish rape and murder. Aging we just shouldn't allow to exist, and the fact that everyone takes for granted, you know, there's no choice but to just get old, die, and rot. I mean, in 100 years, that will be looked on as insanely barbaric, the same way we look back on slavery as insanely barbaric now.
Then this line is how thin the slices we're cutting with that deli slicer are. So we're cutting 30 nanometer thin slices, so they're 30 billionths of a meter thin. And then we collect them on tape. So basically we have miles of tape that are collecting these sections of this brain, and then we spool them up. Jeff's lab cuts them up and then put them on silicon wafers, and then we just have a catalog of this animal's brain. So every piece of their brain cut into 30 nanometer thin slices and then put onto these wafers. And then we image them in this, which is was at the time when it was built, the world's fastest electron microscope, which then images at 4 nanometer resolution and produces about 2 petabytes of data for a cubic millimeter of brain. So then we take all that data, almost 2 petabytes of data, and of all places, it then goes to 1 Summer Street above the Macy's in downtown Crossing in Boston. And the final resting place of this animal's brain then at Harvard is this. This is a 2 petabyte storage array. So this is a bunch of hard drives. We're storing what remains of this animal's brain in digital form there. And then from there, IARPA wants us to deliver the brain up to the cloud. So this is a 40 gigabit per second brocade switch to the Internet 2 infrastructure. So this is like the fast internet. And we upload that animal's brain to the cloud. You know, this idea of brain uploading is sort of captured a little bit of the sort of popular imagination. So, you know, Time and Focus and the magazines have started to sort of latch onto this issue. What if we could upload our brain? Maybe that's a path to immortality. You know, back in the 80s, William Gibson wrote a book called Neuromancer that sort of explored these themes of brain uploading. And, you know, there have been more recent works of art, you know, film that have explored this idea, like uploading the brain. This is interesting, too, because it interacts. I mean, some people are taking this idea so seriously that here's an example of a woman who recently was dying, had a terminal disease, and she decided that what she wanted to do was to preserve her brain in the hopes that people like us would figure out how to later upload her brain and reconstitute it. And using similar techniques to preserve her brain is what we use to preserve our rat's brain.
So the idea of a brain scanning would be to start with the brain, fixate it using various chemical techniques, slice it up thinly, scan each of these slices using advanced microscopy, reconstruct in a computer the three-dimensional structure where everything is and what it is, and then use various mathematical methods to turn that into a computer simulation of what would be going on in the brain. I believe that an uploaded person would actually be a person with consciousness, emotions, and we should give them human rights and treat them as real people.
Creating systems that have this kind of hierarchical neocortex, that can reason like a human, deal with language like a human. But what we'll use them for is not some alien invasion of intelligent machines as if they came from Mars, but actually to enhance our own intelligence. I mean, this does make us smarter, and ultimately it's going to go inside our bodies and brains, and that's why we create these tools. That's what's unique about humans. We go beyond our limitations. We couldn't reach that higher fruit at that branch 1,000 years ago, so we invented a tool extending our reach, and then we leveraged our muscles to create the pyramids and great structures. Now we can access all of human knowledge with a few keystrokes, and ultimately we'll directly expand our intelligence.
The Brain Initiative, to sequence and map the entire human brain. I mean, think about it. We'll be able to understand what is schizophrenia, what is bipolar disorder, mental illness. That's going to be the short term. Even farther down the line is having a brain pacemaker for people with Alzheimer's disease. We are now understanding how memories are being formed, so why not create memories that are useful for people suffering from Alzheimer's? That's called the brain pacemaker, and the first memory was inserted into a mouse last year. That's how path-breaking and how fast this is moving. And think about this. If we have a memory stored on a disk with all your neural networks on it, and it will live after you die, meaning that just like in her, perhaps some of you will live forever. Your memories, your personality, your goals, your dreams will live in a computer. And perhaps your great-great-great-great-great-grandkids will have a conversation with you long after you're dead.
We now have the software of life, and we're also making exponential progress in being able to model it, simulate it, understand it, and reprogram it.
It's a very complicated process to consider what it might be like to upload the mind into a different type of system outside the body and outside the housing of the brain. But it's a tremendously wonderful field in that it pushes the limits of what we think we are and what we think we can become. So it's a wide open field of possibilities for not only each individual, but for civilization. Yeah, there you go. I would like to see what the world is like and be part of a species that has pretty much removed death, not as a necessity, but as a conclusion. It's a foregone conclusion. We are going to die. And I think it'd be fascinating to see what it would be like if that foregone conclusion was no longer foregone.
If I happen to die before I manage to upload my mind, in that case, I'm going to hopefully be frozen into liquid nitrogen.
What would be the point of being frozen?
Well, there is a chance of being revived. If you get burned to ashes or worm food, well, none of your information remains. There is no chance whatsoever of getting you back.
So you actually hope to be frozen and then wake up being in a computer?
Yes. That would make me quite happy. So a neural impulse in my brain, that is of course a biochemical process, but we could imagine in a computer a piece of software calculating that now this much energy must move to that area, those areas will have these levels of chemicals change. So all the processes in the real biological brain would have counterparts in the software. They might be very different from what's actually happening in a real brain, but they have exactly the same function.
People with Parkinsons who shake uncontrollably, you can actually see that there's a part of the brain in a brain scan that's overactive, that lights up. We can put a probe directly into that part of the brain and nullify it, quiet that part of the brain.
Now?
Now. This is today. This is one of the standard ways of treating Parkinson's disease. Also, people who are clinically depressed and have resisted psychotherapy and psychiatry and psychology, brain scans reveal that certain parts of the brain, again, are overactive. By putting tiny little needles into the brain painlessly, you can quiet that area. And I've seen videotapes where a person is suicidal one instant and the next instant, joy and tremendous vigor coming into that person's face. It's amazing what you can do because we're now beginning to unravel the human thinking process.
Research has shown that people actually begin to subjectively identify with their avatar. But in the future, it's not going to be a little picture in a virtual environment you're looking at. It'll feel like this is your body and you're in that environment, and that your body is the virtual body, and it can be as realistic as real reality, and the environment can be as realistic as real reality. And so we'll be routinely able to change our bodies very quickly, as well as our environments, in virtual reality, but it will feel very real. We'll ultimately be able to do that with real reality too, like self-organizing swarms of nanobots that can link themselves up into a virtual body.
Nanotechnology, genetic selection, even brain implants. Sounds like science fiction, but it's actually real.
We can upload his consciousness. We can save him.
The merging of man and machine, creating a superhuman.
Our age already looks very science fiction to someone born a century ago.
I think the future is limitless.
I'm not sure that selecting some of the genes for our children is that different than selecting what schools they go to, picking their diets, picking what books we read them.
Brain implants are, these days, normal, especially for people without a critical link like a damaged or missing nerve connecting the ear and brain. Implants are limited for sure, but they give new hope.
Left leg up.
Helping the paralyzed regain movement in Kentucky and the blind to see in Michigan. Just this January, patients there received the first U.S. implants of a bionic eye, engineered by the company Second Sight.
In addition to radical life extension, we're going to have radical life expansion. We're going to have millions of virtual environments to explore. We're going to literally expand our brains. Right now, we only have 300 million pattern recognizers organized in a grand hierarchy that we create ourselves in our neocortex. But we can make that 300 billion or 300 trillion. We can expand it. The last time we expanded it with the frontal cortex, we created language and art and science. Just think of the qualitative leaps that we can't even imagine today. When we expand our neocortex again, we'll be thinking grander, deeper, more hierarchical thoughts than ever before, creating whole new institutions like art and science that we could not articulate.
And what is now a sort of a trickle of these developments is going to be a flood. 10 years from now, these technologies will be 1,000 times more powerful than they are today because they're doubling in power every year. They'll be 1,000,000 times more powerful in 20 years. We'll reach a point 10 to 20 years from now, probably closer to 10, where we're adding more than a year every year, not just to infant life expectancy, but to your remaining life expectancy. Now, life expectancy is a statistical phenomenon. You could have a life expectancy of 50 years, 80 years, and be hit by the proverbial bus tomorrow. But we're working on that too with self-driving cars. And so maybe within 15 years from now, you go forward a year, your life expectancy will move on away from you. So that's one development. Another is virtual reality, three-dimensional printing. We're going to be able to print all the things we need, clothing, even organs. That's actually being experimented with now. It's been done successfully in animals, printing out actual kidneys and lungs and hearts.
The very first AI is going to be at least as important and big as the Manhattan Project. You have to see AI in terms of almost like a nuclear weapon. It could be so smart that it could do all sorts of things, and it could be malicious and it could be very nice. So, you know, whatever happens, it's one of the very few times that I don't want to say that I become anti-transhumanist, but I do pull back and say, you know, some of the experts that have been saying, you know, Elon Musk and whatnot have been warning, they're correct to warn.
Yep.